Spiritual possession. Whether you believe in it or not, it's something that medical staff, social workers, and the criminal justice system are increasingly having to understand. Healers and exorcists are operating without regulation, offering help to people who believe they're afflicted by spirits, jinns, jadoo, all the words they use to describe it.
I was actually physically fidgeting and flinching and all over the place. I was on the floor in my house, I was on the floor and I couldn't take it. And I was actually screaming and the jinn was trying to come out my mouth.
New research by Warwick University has highlighted the problem of British Asians blaming the supernatural for mental health problems. Sufferers of schizophrenia blaming spiritual possession.
A Sikh gentleman who became ill when he was 18, but the family sought help within the community faith group. And he didn't come to psychiatric attention for 13 years. We saw him when he was 31. And by that time, a lot of damage is done from the untreated illness.
It comes as 4 members of the same family are found guilty of murdering a young woman they said was possessed.
Her in-laws had thinking was that they'd get the body released from here, take it back home, get it buried, nobody would ask any questions. It would be very easy to explain back home, explain it away and say, Jinn killed her.
I'm Katrin Nye and I've spent the last 10 months looking at this issue for a BBC Asian Network Reports special, Possession, Jinn and Britain's Backstreet Exorcists. So this is your office.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about your day-to-day job, what you do here.
Day-to-day job, basically it's a temporary accommodation agency.
41-year-old Mudassar Khan works for a lettings company in Walthamstow in East London. He's married with 4 children.
Everything to do with the housing, cutting keys, checking the property.
His boss has to be flexible about his hours.
He gave me this job, I work part-time.
Sometimes Mudassar has to take time off suddenly.
If I do get ill, he's very flexible in that way, the time that I miss, so he's really good with stuff like that. But most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm fine.
He believes he's possessed by a jinn, a supernatural being, and it affects his work.
1 minute you're normal, yeah, everything's normal. One of the days where something just sort of like grabbed me from behind on my shoulders and pushed me down. When I can't remember, I was picking up my little girl up from school and I was coming home. And as I was entering the house, it's like I turned around, I thought somebody come and jumped me from behind, like maybe one of my friends or one of the neighbours. I turned around, there was no one there. And I actually sort of went down onto my knees. It's like someone pushed me. And I think that was sort of the turning point where I thought something's not right. But when this problem started, these symptoms of this heaviness and stiffness and this buzzing sound around my body like tightness, then when I would start praying or reading the Quran or listening to the Quran, then I would feel worse. I would get more, the thing, it's like something's squashing me.
So you started connecting the feelings with religion?
Yeah, so I think obviously it's because when I'm reading, I'm praying, this thing, whatever this, if it's a jinn or if it's black magic or whatever, it's like counter-attacking it, so it's fighting back.
Mudassar has been prescribed antidepressants in the past. He's also been signed off work for panic attacks, but he claims medications never worked for him.
I had to go to the doctors and the hospitals to prove it to my family, because if I didn't do it on that side of it as well, they'd think that there's something, it's just in his head. So I had to prove it to them that it's not in my head. I'm getting medical help. I'm going to the doctors. I've been to the hospitals. They've done blood tests. They've done ECGs. So I've got both sides. I even went to a psychiatrist. I think I waited 6 months for my appointment or something like that, 7 months. By the time my appointment came through, and I'm talking to the psychiatrist, and she discharged me after 1 appointment.
Instead, for years now, Mudassar's been coming to see Abu Muhammad, an exorcist who operates from the back room of his home in Ilford in East London. Abu Muhammad let me sit in on one of his sessions with Mudassar. He reads passages from the Quran, he uses oils, sometimes sprays water, and applies pressure to the body of his clients. He gives people holy water to drink, encourages them to pray. He insists he does not use violence. Here he's talking to what he claims is Mudassar's jinn.
Is it you who caused him panic attack? Is it you who sent him to hospital? What you did? Huh? What's your name? Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
Abu Muhammad knows what he does is viewed by some as highly controversial. He's recording me the whole time we're recording him, in case I distort what he does here. After the session, he agreed to be interviewed. Why do people come to you?
I think, people, when they have a problem, either the evil eye or magic or the jinn possession, they come. Of course, like why, you can ask this question as well, why people go to the doctor.
Do you think that you help people?
By the will of Allah, I say yes.
Do you have people who come to you who you think are severely ill?
There is sometimes people they don't have, problem. Their problem is psychological problem or family problem. So, if I cannot, or if it's not my domain, if the problem is not a spiritual problem, I always refer them, or I advise them to go to see a doctor. Or, have you seen the doctor before? Have you been checked? Have you seen a psychologist? If they said no, I said, please, start with them first.
You charge for your services?
Yes.
And some people say that's haram, that's something you shouldn't do. How do you feel about that?
There's nothing wrong. This is my full-time job. It's a job. And I work from morning until evening. And I have children, I have this and I have that. They can't say, don't abuse people. Don't abuse people with the money. Don't go beyond the, charge reasonably. But there is people who rip people off. They take this opportunity, people that are desperate, and you use that to suck the blood of these people. That is haram. That is unlawful. That you are eating haram. I cure them by this book. You have to have a faith in it. It will work. So yes, anxiety, depression, heart, believe me, many people get cured by.
Madassa feels the treatment works, though he says plenty of his friends think it's absolute rubbish. What do you think he's done to help you?
Reciting the Quran, that's all he did. Recite, like I said, with the water and the oil. Obviously, I know what to recite. He's giving me the verses, which are the stronger ones to recite. So, I recite them myself. Certain people who are close to, they do believe me that there is something. But with me,
for you, it's helped.
Yeah, for me, it made a big difference. It's like, I just thank God I'm back to normal.
Madassa's not alone in his belief in the spirit world. At its extreme, some British Asians like him think that the body can be possessed and that this can cause you physical harm. For others, there can be a lesser belief in things like the evil eye or nazar. Importantly, the concept of jinn is written in the Quran, and so for British Muslims there's a theological grounding for their belief, though what jinn actually are is not universally agreed upon. While making this documentary, I've heard evil spirits blamed for bipolar disorder, for criminal acts, for epilepsy, even for not getting a job. This belief can of course be harmless. What's concerning academics is when it replaces medical explanations for serious illness.
Well, I take it in the evening, right, so I take 2 a day. That does me nice, yeah.
This is 20-year-old Nadeem. We've changed his name to protect his identity. When Nadeem became ill, he and his family thought he had a spiritual problem, that he was possessed by a jinn.
I was at home, and obviously even my family, their faces, they looked very different to me. My sense changed a bit as well. My brother was touching me and he felt a bit weird. Then I tried to lie down and get some sleep, but felt my head is getting narrowed. And then I came downstairs that night, right? I just sat there, and my dad goes, "What's up with you?" I go, "Look, I feel weird. These walls, they look weird. Everything just looks weird, and I can't take it. And it's not a nice feeling." And my parents got worried. They go, "Don't worry. We'll chat to a certain guy who came, and he'll sort it out. And so they found it's just a person who's got the power to control these things and take them out,
He told me what it was like when this man, someone who claims to be able to fix spiritual problems, was treating him.
I was actually physically fidgeting and flinching and all over the place. I was on the floor in my house. I was on the floor and I couldn't take it. And I was actually screaming, and the Jinn was trying to come out my mouth. It was trying to come out my mouth. It was vomiting, but spiritually. There was no other food on me. It was just, I was vomiting spiritually, and so the Jinn's come out. That Jinn, come out.
But despite this treatment, Nadeem's problems continued. But you didn't get better?
Everything just felt weird. I was lying down, and I had to be able to fit again, but I don't know if that was the Jinn myself. I think that was medical, mentally. I was shouting, I was just talking to my brothers, I was shouting. What my dad did, my dad phoned the hospital, and they come, the ambulance come, they took me to the hospital, they took me inside, they admitted me. My parents, my mom was crying, looking at my state. The guy coming to me, the psychiatrist coming to me, he goes, what's the matter? Then I started telling him about what happened. And obviously, as a doctor, as a psychiatrist, he wasn't much aware of the superstitious, the supernatural, about the jinns. I don't think they knew. So he was like shell-shocked himself.
You feel sad when you see young lives blighted by serious mental illness. And sometimes there is this sense, I wish you had come for treatment earlier. I wish we'd seen you earlier. It's a bit late now.
It's cases like Nadeem's that cause concern for mental health professionals, that his illness was instantly attributed to possession. Professor Swaran Singh is the head of the mental health division at Warwick Medical School and a consultant psychiatrist. He's just completed a 5-year study looking at why patients from ethnic minority backgrounds were reaching mental health services often in a more severely ill state than the rest of the population.
We found that in the very early stages, when people have depression or anxiety or become a little bit withdrawn, they seek help through their GP because it looks like a psychological problem. When they become seriously unwell, like they develop delusions or they start hearing voices, then the groups diverge. The Asian groups, particularly the British Pakistanis, they then attribute their problem to a religious cause, for instance, possession by a jinn. So they seek help through the imams, through the mosque. So it is at the point of emergence of serious mental illness that the ethnic differences start emerging, with the British Asian population seeking help through faith healers rather than through GPs or psychiatrists.
And in the most extreme cases, what problems does this cause?
The real problem is if there is a delay in getting appropriate care. We know that there is a kind of window of opportunity. The earlier you treat symptoms, the better the outcome is. The extreme case I can think of in the last few years is a Sikh gentleman who became ill when he was 18. But the family sought help within the community faith group, and he didn't come to psychiatric attention for 13 years. We saw him when he was 31. And by that time, a lot of damage is done from the untreated illness. There is sometimes financial exploitation of vulnerable people. Often, treatment only becomes available when there's a crisis.
Do you think these people can be dangerous?
Untreated mental illnesses can be a big risk. And if religious process becomes an alternative to medical treatment, dangerous.
I'm Katrin Nye, and this is an Asian Network Report special, Possession, Jinn, and Britain's Backstreet Exorcists. New research by Warwick University has highlighted the problem of British Asians blaming the supernatural for mental health problems, sufferers of schizophrenia blaming spiritual possession and turning to exorcists for help. But the story of possession goes further than this. Things can go seriously wrong.
क्यों नहीं याद होगा? क्योंकि शायद इसलिए याद रह जाएगा कि उस दिन उस छोड़ के चली गई जब वाकई सन छोड़ के चली गई.
I've travelled to Manchester to meet Nasir Mahmood and Tony Meddy. They show me a wedding video of Nasir's sister Naila Mumtaz. Just over a month ago, the man she's marrying in the video and 3 members of his family were jailed for life for her murder. The trial heard evidence that Naila was killed as family members attempted to drive out some sort of evil spirit or jinn.
किस तरह दी गल से भी जिस तरह मैं सोच नहीं सी सकता.
He says it was unbelievable. He says he couldn't believe that anything like that ever could happen, or anything like that had happened, that she died.
Why do you think the Jinn was mentioned in this court case?
Her in-laws had thinking was that they'd get the body released from here, take it back home, get it buried. Nobody would ask any questions. It would be very easy to explain back home, explain it away and say, Jinn killed her, and that's it. She's dead.
No permission has ever been given to say that you beat them. This is something which has been fabricated and now is being passed off as religious or cultural acceptabilities. And there is absolutely no place for these villains.
Yasmin Ishak is a teacher from Rotherham and works with a number of faith groups in the town. She says she's grown up with spiritual possession and jinn as the norm and as an excuse for almost anything.
If somebody was saying, I'm being abused, or I'm being, threatened, or I'm living in horrific conditions, they would automatically silence them by saying, she's possessed. And the gross injustice of how the women, I'm talking from personal experiences, family members, neighbors, community members, where women were beaten on the premises that they were possessed, when in reality it was just violence against women. Here today, we have men claiming in national newspapers that they can fix all your problems. But the element in there to sort of delude the public is that it is the jinns that are causing all these problems.
Despite her scepticism about the way that possession's been used in the Asian community, Yasmin became a healer herself. She argues she's doing it the right way.
Anyone who can recite the Quran, anyone who has learnt the translation, who understands what they're reciting, can become a healer. There are no special powers or hidden and mystical powers around this. People, sadly, today have turned it into a business where it's often said, well, first of all, you have to have permission. These are lies. And if there is a problem, you can fix it for free. Hence, I don't charge a single penny. I never have and I never will. Because if there is a genuine problem, all I am doing is reciting verses from the Quran. The Quran is free. Reciting it doesn't require anything other than my time. And if I'm willing to give my time, then there really shouldn't be, well, I've given you my time, can you now please give me a huge price for this? Often with the older generations, it is very, very difficult trying to get this understanding across to them that, look, there are genuine medical issues here. And can we please move away from these elements of it has to be demonic? Because we cannot bear the stigma of having mental health issues within our family.
It was stigma attached to mental illness that Sunita Arora claims created serious problems when her brother became unwell.
There was just no comprehension about the reality of it all. I think they thought that if we go to a temple and we pray, that he'll get better. Now, my brother was really intelligent, is really intelligent, but the things that he was saying was so bizarre. And 6 months into the depression, which I figured I guess what was the right name at the time, I thought, this is something more.
Was there mention of things like jinn and possession through this?
Yes. He's been possessed. We don't know what it is. We'll talk to a Gyani priest. We'll do these ceremonies. But the actual study of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia wasn't there. We have got a serious illness in our family. We need to understand this more. It was almost a sense of shame.
Before any medical treatment, she says her parents insisted he seek religious help.
They were just really stupid ideas about what would make him feel better. Giving money to certain priests, giving money to certain temples, praying, throwing things in a river. It was absurd.
How did it feel seeing a brother like that?
I cried a lot. He was a shell of who he was. He was vibrant, he was intelligent, he was funny, he was handsome, and now he was doped up, sectioned, lost, angry, and angry with me, and I was closest to him for putting him in a mental health unit. I think had they been better informed and less superstitious, then they could have seen what it was. But the superstition and the reliance on priests added to his illness. And I feel that many Asian families are the same, whether they're educated or not. It's this handing over of responsibility to a religious institution, thinking that karma, qismat, fate, reincarnation, all those things are part of the package of how we live now and the things that happen to us.
Sunita insists her brother was made far worse because the family blamed his illness on a spiritual problem, that the delay made his condition more severe. So how does this compare to people like Mudassar Khan, who we heard from earlier? He says his mild mental health problems are helped by seeing an exorcist. One of the people I've met for this documentary, he is absolutely adamant that going to see a Raqi, a healer, it helps him. He feels better. How do you explain that?
Well, talking to someone about your problems makes you feel better. There's no doubt about that. So seeking comfort and having belief in that, the ability of that person to help you, will help you. All medicines are tested against a placebo. There is a very strong psychological effect of seeking help from a person you trust can help you. Panic attack and depression, the standard treatment now for mild panic and anxiety and depression is not medication, it's talking therapies. And talking therapies in some cultures mean talking to a healer. So it may well work. For serious mental disorders, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be the sufficient treatment.
So while some healers can offer help, I've met people who have quite clearly been ripped off, charged thousands for the so-called services of spiritual healers.
Half an hour consultations or initial recitations can cost you anywhere between 150 to 200 pounds. And then you're asked to sort of come for further 40 sessions or 40 days. There is no sort of guidelines of what's acceptable. I've known of male healers that have been given Mercedes as, they've been given, flash cars as rewards. And it needs to be highlighted that it is a serious problem within our communities, and getting away with, gross abuse, even murder. Unfortunately, there is a fear around this whole culture of how much these voodoo men, these charlatans, these magicians, how much sort of harm they can cause your families if you sort of retaliate or you try to bring them to justice. Education is needed, that they really do not have these powers that they claim. And it's like any other culture of abuse. Silence actually, instigates further acts of violence.
So how do you deal with them? The so-called healer that was in the room when Naila Mumtaz was murdered was never traced. On top of that, just over a month ago, 3 Asian men from East London were found guilty of assault after their own relative was accused of being possessed and beaten. In that case, someone they called an imam beat the woman with a stick. He was also never traced.
I'm Nazir Afzal. I'm the Chief Crown Prosecutor for the North West of England.
There have been 2 high-profile recent court cases, one in Birmingham, one in London. Both cases, the so-called healer, not traced, nowhere to be seen. Is that a failure?
It's a lack of understanding of how these people operate. They do operate in the shadows. They are protected by others within their communities or within their faiths or within their places of worship. They may leave the country. So it can be very difficult to track down the healer. That said, we're getting a lot more intelligence, or the police are getting a lot more intelligence from within the communities in the hope that we can identify these people before serious harm occurs. What we would like to be able to do is prosecute more of these cases, but I can't create the evidence. The evidence is victims, it's witnesses, it's medical evidence, it's forensic evidence, and that will come from the communities or the families which are affected.
Is it an increasing problem?
We're becoming more aware of it. I'm actually very pleased that we've been talking to lots of community groups over the last 3-4 years, and so we're becoming more aware of instances.
Mudassar Khan says he's now coping with his problems through prayer and visits to his healer. He says, whatever others think, for him, it works.
I believe it's the Quran. By me reciting and praying and having faith in God, I think that's what's helping me. That's what's making it easier and laying off me. I'm not saying it's gone. It hasn't gone. Because only, at the end of the day, God's going to heal you.
Nadeem was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia and now takes daily medication. He still says he did have a Jinn, but admits he also needs the medication.
So obviously, if I stop taking a tablet for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, I'll be fine. But then after that, I'll be having the symptoms and I'll be going off target. I'll be getting lost. So that's why it's for, to keep me balanced, to keep my mental state normal.
Because you have relapsed a few times, haven't you? You stopped taking
Yeah,
them.
I mean, the doctors have recommended to take it for a longer time because I had a relapse twice.
So when you had a relapse, you again went to a spiritual person to check what was wrong with you?
Yeah.
And he said you've got, well, he said...
Medical.
Did he say you got schizophrenia? He said
no,
something medical.
Yeah, he goes, he's medically ill. He hasn't got no spiritual problem. He's fine. He's medically ill. Admit him or get him into hospital and find out what's the problem. So yeah, that's what I feel lucky that at least there's someone there who can even guide me on that path.
This is an issue that's not going away. I spoke to the spiritual care department at East London's Mental Health Trust, now one of the most diverse parts of the UK. What they told me was that their services were established to serve a community where religion was dying out. Now, most of their patients value the spiritual as much as they do science.
If you go to your mosque or your temple and the priest prays for you or offers some religious service, it may bring you comfort. It definitely brings the family some comfort. It becomes problematic when it becomes an alternative to medical care. Faith may offer comfort. It doesn't offer a cure for illnesses.
New research by Warwick University has highlighted the problem of British Asians blaming the supernatural for mental health problems, sufferers of schizophrenia blaming spiritual possession.
A Sikh gentleman who became ill when he was 18, but the family sought help within the community faith group, and he didn't come to psychiatric attention for 13 years. We saw him when he was 31, and by that time a lot of damage is done from the untreated illness.
It comes as 4 members of the same family are found guilty of murdering a young woman they said was possessed.
Normal, yeah, everything's normal. One of the days where something just sort of like grabbed me from behind on my shoulders and pushed me down. As when I can't remember, I was picking up my little girl up from school and I was coming home. And as I was entering the house, it's like I turned around, I thought somebody come and jumped me from behind, like maybe one of my friends or one of the neighbours. I turned around, there was no one there. And I actually sort of went down onto my knees. It's like someone pushed me. And I think that was sort of the turning point where I thought something's not right. But when this problem started, these symptoms of this heaviness and stiffness.
Spiritual possession. Whether you believe in it or not, it's something that medical staff, social workers, and the criminal justice system are increasingly having to understand. Healers and exorcists are operating without regulation, offering help to people who believe they're afflicted by spirits, jinns, jadoo, all the words they use to describe it.
I was actually physically fidgeting and flinching and all over the place. I was on the floor in my house, I was on the floor and I couldn't take it. And I was actually screaming and the Jinn was trying to come.
Possessed.
Her in-laws had thinking was that they'd get the body released from here, take it back home, get it buried, nobody would ask any questions. It would be very easy to explain back home, explain it away and say, Jinn killed her.
I'm Katrin Nye and I've spent the last 10 months looking at this issue for a BBC Asian Network Report special, Possession, Jinn and Britain's Backstreet Exorcists. So this is your office.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about your day-to-day job, what you do here.
Day-to-day job, basically it's a temporary accommodation agency.
41-year-old Madassa Khan works for a lettings company in Walthamstow in East London. He's married with 4 children.
Everything to do with the housing, cutting keys, checking the property.
His boss has to be flexible about his hours.
He gave me this job, I work part-time.
Sometimes Madassa has to take time off suddenly.
If I do get ill, he's very flexible in that way, time that I miss, so he's really good with stuff like that. So most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm fine.
He believes he's possessed by a jinn, a supernatural being, and it affects his work.
1 minute